Men will no longer communicate and barb.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back not 28 years later, but 6 months later. Those 6 months really flew by, didn't they? This video is a little late, but it will still be split up between spoilers and spoiler-free. This movie also seemed to have snuck up on us out of nowhere when that first trailer dropped. We have talked about every movie in the 28 days / years / whatever you want to call it franchise, and each one has been a very unique take on the apocalypse genre, managing to juggle heavy themes and the intense insanity of the world we are watching. So it should come as no surprise to see that me and Mr. Minus are back once again to talk about the latest installment, 28 years later, The Bone Temple, a film that manages to fit right into the universe. We will be going over our thoughts of the movie spoiler-free for the first part, and then we will be getting to the nitty-gritty. But before I let you get too far, just wanted to say if you're new here and enjoy what you're watching, be sure to hit all those neat buttons down below as it really helps support the channel. I'll also have linked in the description below our socials and the 4-player gaming channel where we dive into the terrifying world of horror video games. But anyways, now you can pass through. The Bone Temple is directed by Nia DaCosta, written by Alex Garland, and is a direct follow-up to the previous 28 years later. If you all recall, it seems that the last film had people really split on what they had thought about it. I have seen people call it one of the best infection movies out there and one of the worst movies in general to exist. It caused quite the divide. A lot of people hated the ending, and some of the experimental nature of the movie had turned a few people away. Thankfully, it sounds like a lot of people who weren't big fans of the last one actually came out of this one pleasantly surprised. I quite enjoyed the last one, so I had expected to enjoy this one as well. What I didn't expect is to love this film. I'm going to try not to glaze this movie too hard, but we will see. What I will say is the movie isn't performing all that well in the box office, and if we don't get a third movie, I will end it all. So get out of that chair and go see this film. I haven't seen any other movies by Nia DaCosta. Funnily enough, I learned she directed the Marvels after seeing this. Quite the contrast there. I had previously thought The Bone Temple was going to be a prequel to 28 years later, so I was pleasantly surprised when I saw in the trailer that we were going to be continuing forward with the plot of Spike and the Jimmy Colt and Dr. Kelson. Dr. Kelson was a fan favorite in the last movie, so I'm sure a lot of people will be happy to hear that he is pretty much the main character of this movie, shared with the very haunting and evil Jimmy, which we will get to here in a bit. Because of this, however, Spike does take a bit of a backseat in this movie, but he does still have a lot to do. He isn't completely sidelined. That didn't bother me too much because the story we follow with Dr. Kelson I thought was incredible. I wasn't sure why he became such a beloved character after the last one, but I see it here, especially after a certain segment. You know, or will know exactly what I'm talking about. He has such a unique perspective to the infection, seeing it through the eyes of someone that wants to treat the virus. Obviously, everyone would want a cure, but when they see an infected, they are going to chop its head off, whereas Dr. Kelson would humanely kill the infected. And the story we see with him and our Alpha from the last film is just a spectacle to see. While Jimmy shows us the pure evil side of humanity, Dr. Kelson is here to show us the opposite. Something that was a little strange about this movie is that there are some plot lines from the first movie that are just not mentioned at all here. To be fair, we all knew this was going to be a trilogy, so I'm expecting these threads to be picked back up in the third film. But I wouldn't be surprised if some people walk out concerned they didn't see Aaron Taylor Johnson at all. While it would have been nice to see Spike have a bit more to do, I felt like he was given enough to still keep him relevant to the story. Overall, the sequel puts most of its focus into Dr. Kelson and Jimmy. Everyone of the cast did their part excellently as well. Everyone in Jimmy's cult managed to come off as very deranged and disturbing. They definitely were a group of people you desperately hated and wanted to see get what's coming to them. And surprisingly enough, this movie takes on a slower pace than the others, and 28 years later was already shocking with how much slower it was. There are not that many moments where we have to worry about infected. Most of the fear comes from the actions of Jimmy's cult. And boy, do they manage to do more than enough. I didn't think it was possible, but this is easily the most graphic out of the franchise. There were a lot of moments I just felt this sinking feeling just knowing what was about to happen. It was almost made even worse because a lot of the times it was just something you could hear rather than see. All of this culminates into a very satisfying build-up and conclusion, and overall, I just really don't have many complaints about this movie, if any at all. I thought the characters were incredibly interesting, the acting was excellent, the movie looked great, it had me feeling the emotions at some point. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. But let's hand the mic over to Mr. Minus to give his thoughts on the film, and to give us some more insight into the character Jimmy.
The 28 franchise continues to deliver a unique take on the zombie genre, even nearly a quarter century from its original installment. Zombie movies to many have worn out their welcome with the same rules, the same character tropes, and the same plot lines. This franchise has all the familiar tools, but manages to not only be interesting, but deeper as a work of art. In our 28 Years Later review, you may recall I said something along the lines of how the movie is unfortunately reliant on if the next film is able to expand on its storyline and themes, particularly with the Jimmy cult. And I am happy to report it absolutely did, and in turn may retroactively improve the previous entry. The themes of 28 Years Later were regarding the old world versus the new world, but also had commentary on political events like Brexit. The Bone Temple's themes are mostly revolving around religion, radicalism, and dangerous leaders. One of the more controversial aspects of 28 Years Later was the ending, as it seemed very goofy compared to the rest of the film. From the filming style to the clothing of the Jimmy cult, it was very much a departure from what we had sat through for nearly 2 hours. This movie made the Jimmy cult pretty terrifying. Jimmy himself, played by Jack O'Connell, aka that dude from Sinners, was a very threatening presence. His ego and thirst for attention was always putting characters in danger. In many ways, Jimmy is supposed to be the Antichrist, or at least an inversion of Jesus. Whereas Jesus had disciples whom he preached love and peace with to the masses, Jimmy preaches malevolence and death. He brings nothing but pain and misery. He claims to be the son of Satan and leads his deranged cult of Jimmys across the apocalypse, forcefully converting people or leaving them 6 feet under. Yet in all this, there are even times where Jimmy opens up to people, despite his delusions of being this godlike figure. Jimmy shows signs of having human elements from fear, regret, sorrow, doubt, and even memories of a childhood. This isn't to say he's a tragic character or exonerated of his actions, but it shows we aren't dealing with a one-dimensional villain. Jimmy is what happens when a flawed and deeply disturbed human tries to become God. But if you're still not convinced about the cult, then perhaps a bit of real-life information may be able to put some light on the subject. The Jimmy cult definitely has odd fashion choices. From the blonde wigs to the jumpsuits, they're quite strange design-wise. But some will know that this isn't just weird for the sake of being weird. Their entire look is based around a once loved and now deceased and disgraced British figure named Jimmy Savile. For the uninitiated, Jimmy Savile was an entertainment figure in British media. He was featured in most forms of entertainment, from radio host, TV star, and even did a bit of pro wrestling. He died in 2011, but that wasn't the end of his story. A staggering number of allegations about him have come out since then. Among them include sexual assault of elders as old as 75 and children as young as 5. Some reports even claim he had engaged in necrophilia. Even worse, there were multiple times high-profile celebrities like Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols, and even just average people tried reporting this to the authorities or the BBC, but nothing ever came out of it, and sometimes they were even outright censored by news organizations. His charities and wealth allowed him to travel to many hospitals where a large number of his victims were located. All of this has pretty much made Jimmy Savile one of the most notorious figures in modern British history. To put it into perspective for Americans, this was pretty similar to how Americans felt when Bill Cosby was revealed as a predator. As a result, the Jimmy cult is supposed to evoke disturbing imagery from what we now know about Jimmy Savile. It forever demonizes him like he deserves to a larger audience that's unfamiliar with him, and serves as commentary about power. The only issue I have with it is that it's unexplained why Jimmy chose him as their cult icon. The apocalypse started in the early 2000s, so England and the world likely never knew the truth about Jimmy. But even then, there's never much implication that Jimmy was a fan of his work. In fact, he seems to be a fan of the Teletubbies more. Not everything has to be explained, admittedly, but it would have been nice to see why this imagery was chosen. It wouldn't be the first time we've seen apocalypse groups about a pop culture icon as their aesthetic. But usually there's an answer to go along with it. Then again, perhaps the usage of a now infamous figure is better left unsaid for the sake of the viewer concluding their own theories. But even outside of Jimmy, there are standouts. Due to the brutal nature of his cult, the movie is extremely violent. There's many acts of ritualistic violence that might be among the most violent the series has ever seen. We've seen zombies eat humans and tear people up, but we haven't seen just how sadistic humans can be in a situation like this. Performance-wise, there's a few more standouts as well. The Jimmy cult members do well, and Spike is of course still great, but I felt Voldemort was another huge standout in this movie. The last movie heavily focused on Spike, and while he is still a focus of the movie, this time it really feels like our Doctor is taking the center stage. From his relationship with Zombie Dick and his interactions with other survivors, he remains a very interesting character. He feels like he is one of the few sources of good and sanity left in a world that is being invaded by Jimmy and his violent methods. My only real issue I had with the movie was there was one plot line that I'm a little split on. I do find it to be an interesting development for this universe, but it's one I'll have to wait and see how it comes to fruition. Much like the Jimmy cult from 28 Years Later, I do feel this is likely something they'll expand upon, as with the ending scene they gave us, it definitely looks like we're getting a part 3. I won't judge it too harshly, but as of right now, the plot line seems unfinished, and I'm not quite sure where they're going with it. Here's hoping it'll wrap up the franchise nicely. The last thing I'd like to point out is the soundtrack of this movie. I never would have thought, but Bone Temple really came out of nowhere with a soundtrack that's very entertaining. Take note, Stranger Things, that's how you use Iron Maiden. I'm going to give the Bone Temple a very high 8 out of 10. This is a strong improvement from its last installment, and like its predecessor, may benefit from the forthcoming installment, especially since I believe this one will officially end the series as we know it.
This may be a bit of a controversial opinion, but I enjoyed this movie so much I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. Which means I need to go back and do some rating adjustments, because I don't think it's better than Days, but it's right behind it in second place. This movie just had a lot to show and say, and I resonated with a lot of it. I highly recommend you go see this. In fact, if it means a third movie, I beg you to go check it out. But on that note, it's time to get into the spoiler section, so this is your final warning. From this point on, it's dangerous territory. As to be expected, the first thing to talk about here is the opening scene. Each 28 film always has to have a memorable opening, and this one didn't disappoint, that's for sure. It was oddly the least hectic and wild out of all the openings, but still was really disturbing and pretty hard to watch. Spike has to face one of the members of the Jimmy cult to earn his place amongst the group, even though these are people you definitely don't want to associate with. It doesn't look like Spike is going to win this one until he manages to get that lucky shot, stabbing him in the thigh, hitting a vital artery. Once the blood just starts to continuously pool out of his leg, the whole scene just gets really uncomfortable from here on out as we watch this guy just bleed out slowly, realizing his time has come. It was the most different from all the openings as it didn't really include any infected at all, just the horrors of these psychos, which honestly sets up the rest of this movie pretty well. And to call these guys psychos is an understatement, as the next memorable scene is probably the whole barn segment, leading to the most brutal scene in the whole film. Hell, probably the whole franchise. At first I thought we were about to follow new protagonists with our pregnant lady and her family, until they get home and see Jimmy's cult has infiltrated the home. Jimmy and his crew are just terrorizing this poor family and are beginning to make it clear that this family is in trouble. And once one of the patrons throws the boiling water, it's all over. And it was very unfortunate to see that Jimmy and his crew were able to apprehend just about everyone in the family. And boy, did this family get it rough. Jimmy literally has his cult members go ahead and quote-unquote skin off their shirts. I also really liked how the whole scene progressed with the guy choosing who he thought was the weakest member to fight, only to realize she is probably the craziest one. And once the fight starts, he just gets his ass whooped. Little did we know, however, the pregnant lady has managed to sneak into the barn and swings a hook into the back of the cult member's head, killing them in a really eerie scene where we see her body just start spazzing out. The guy who was getting his ass beat then manages to get a propane tank and set one of the other members on fire, killing them as well. I will say the scene where the hook ends up going through the head of that character was put together a little weird. I wasn't really able to picture how that set of events even happened. Jimmy sends Spike to go get the pregnant lady, however once Spike catches up to her, he instead asks her to take him with her. She proceeds to act as if she is going to accept his offer, but once he gets close, she knocks the wind out of him and runs off. It's unfortunate for poor Spike, but this lady just watched the group of people you're currently associated with skin her family alive. While all this is happening, we occasionally cut to Dr. Kelson and the large alpha infected, now known as Samson. I thought this was easily the best part of the movie. Watching Dr. Kelson and Samson frequently getting high together and managing to form some kind of weird friendship with each other was a delight. I thought it was really interesting how he was able to essentially calm down Samson enough with a morphine dart that he just didn't attack and hung around. And he certainly hung around. They really don't do much besides lay on the floor looking at the stars, but it's a big improvement from getting your head ripped off. I really wasn't expecting the movie to go into this direction. Even at the very beginning of the movie, there is a hint at something deeper going on with the virus. We see Samson going to kill someone, but through his eyes, he sees a monster himself, raising a number of questions. During one of their high sessions, Samson and Dr. Kelson even begin to dance with each other. Another relationship I wasn't expecting to see grow was that of Spike and Kelly, one of the members of Jimmy's cult. Spike obviously doesn't want to take part in the brutality, and Kelly manages to understand that. Earlier in the skinning scene, we see Spike leave the barn because he isn't able to handle the sight. And I mean, who could blame him? I could hardly handle it. Kelly wasn't around for the barn scene, however, as she was sent off to look for the pregnant lady, clearly not doing her job very well. While out, she saw Dr. Kelson and Samson dance from afar. And as to be expected, she is very confused at what she's seeing. Kelly ends up returning to the barn while all the skinning is happening and sees Spike outside. He tells her that he is not built for this cult, and Kelly thankfully seems to understand. From this point on, she kind of takes on this protector role for Spike, trying to keep him safe from any danger. Even though I think she still worships Satan? Even though I think she still worshipped Satan, she was at least the nicest out of them all. It was nice to see that Spike wasn't just getting tortured throughout his time with Jimmy, and there was at least someone looking out for him. Jimmy begins to blame Spike for being outside the whole time, saying that is why they now lost 2 members. To try and divert attention away from the situation, Kelly tells everyone what she saw. However, in her strange viewpoint, it's not Dr. Kelson, it's Satan himself, Jimmy's father. Well, not actually Jimmy's father, but who he would like them to think is his father. Jimmy tries to shut the idea down, but Kelly is firm in what she saw, and once she mentions the idea of him dancing with an infected, things begin to change. And this leads us to Jimmy planning on taking the whole cult to visit Dr. Kelson, to visit who they believe is Satan.
The scene with Dr. Kelson and Jimmy was probably among the best in the entire film. Not only do we have two really good actors bringing their absolute best to the material, but this is an amazing showcase of opposites colliding. Dr. Kelson is a man of science and believes in the miracles of the human body. He is caring towards those he runs into and tries to help people even when their situation is hopeless. Jimmy, as stated before, is the exact opposite, as we've seen the entire movie. So when these two finally met, it was a conversation that kept me hooked the entire time. Jimmy was genuinely convinced this was Satan, but you can tell there was doubt in the back of his head as he approached. He continued the charade, but Dr. Kelson immediately shut down this entire act. It's here that things get interesting. Dr. Kelson likely just wants Jimmy to go away since it's clear he's unstable, but their conversations seem to have an impact on Jimmy. We don't see too much of it, but Jimmy basically says he feels very comfortable around the doctor. This is probably the scene that shows the real Jimmy best. The majority of the movie, Jimmy has been acting quite outlandish and unstable. Now we see a more human depiction of him. There's a lot of vulnerability in this scene for such a hateful character. Another interesting detail about this is that Jimmy, once again, is supposed to be an inversion of Jesus and his entire story. If that's the case, this scene is likely in reference to when Jesus met the devil who tried to tempt him. It's a story meant to show that Jesus was of impenetrable will. Here, while Kelson wasn't necessarily trying to change his ways, it seemed like Jimmy was close to possibly changing. The only thing holding him back was the fact that he had to come back to his cult with confirmation of this wild tale he has made. In some ways, it makes me wonder just how much Jimmy believed this tale he spun for himself and the rest of the Jimmys. Another interesting bit of the movie was the development of the infected. These guys have come a long way since they were first introduced in the original movie. The zombies in this franchise have always been a unique take, as they first separated themselves by being able to run. Multiple movies later, we have asymptomatic survivors, alpha zombies, and now, in the latest development, intelligent ones. Throughout the movie, the alpha zombie, properly named Samson, is actually going through growth unlike anything we've ever seen. The last movie, Samson was a terrifying force to be reckoned with, but here he's a lot more personable. As stated, he and Dr. Kelson form a bond together that almost seems father and son-like. This is because Kelson speculates there might be a way to tame the disease like how the zombies did in Marvel Zombies. From what we have learned in this movie, he might actually be right. Kelson comes to the conclusion that Samson can't be helped, so he plans to mercy kill the man. But in the last possible second Samson speaks, he's only able to make one phrase, which is moon, as he looks up at it in the night sky. This leads to Kelson sparing his life. Samson spends the rest of the movie regaining his humanity in a way. He even recalls a memory on a train where he didn't have a ticket and even speaks his response to the ticket lady. This in turn leads to a fight with the infected. Samson is one of the more interesting aspects of the film, but his plotline is a bit unfinished by the end of the movie. As stated before, we have another movie coming, so I'm not going to hold it too much against the film. But with Samson proving the infected can fight the virus, what does this mean for the future of this world? Does this mean the virus can indeed be cured by just sedating them long enough? The infected attacked Samson, so does that mean they have an internal sense of when someone breaks the infection? If Samson recovers fully, how will he feel knowing he literally ate a man's brains out? Obviously, these are questions the movie didn't exactly need to answer, but I am hoping we get some sort of conclusion to Samson's storyline in the finale. His entire existence is a very big step for the universe and its future. It's possible we may know Samson's future already, though. Considering the Bone Temple took inspiration from the story of Jesus, it's entirely possible it could take reference from other biblical characters. One in particular Samson really resembles is, well, Samson. Samson in the Bible was a strong warrior with long hair. It was believed that his hair was the source of his power. Samson was, however, betrayed by his lover Delilah after many attempts to probe his weakness from him. In the night, she shaved his head and his enemies took him captive. Samson was enslaved now that his power was gone, but he managed to get the last laugh. In a temple, while locked up, Samson begged God for one last burst of strength. The wish was granted, and thus Samson pulled the pillars of the temple down with his chains and killed everyone, including himself. Obviously, our movie version has plenty of hair and plenty of strength, but I doubt that is the source of his power. It's unclear what further connections there are to him and the character in the Bible, but if the writers are going to take any further inspiration, it's entirely possible our good friend Samson may have a dire fate awaiting him, potentially dying to kill whatever villain we will face in the third movie. Next scene I'd like to talk about is literally the best scene in the movie. If you have seen the film, then you know what this is, the Iron Maiden scene. It's hard to think of a scene more metal than this in recent memory. In short, after their conversation, Jimmy realizes Kelson isn't the devil. The issue is that his cult is expecting the answer to be that he is. Thus, they need to trick him into believing he is Satan. So as a result, Kelson goes all out, to say the least. He cranks it up to 11 and commits to the bit. He pulls out his high school makeup and sets up a ring of fire around the Bone Temple, and he blasts Iron Maiden. When the cultists arrive, he brings his A game. He jumps about, he stares into their souls, he disappears and then reappears, he does it all. This scene was badass. The music selection is perfect and Ralph Fiennes commits perfectly to the bit. You look at him as the simple Dr. Kelson and then this transformation into Satan, it's amazing to see. Not since Finn Balor have I seen a demon transformation this awesome. This scene really needs to be witnessed because we cannot do it justice with our words. It's worth the ticket price alone. When I turn old and senile due to dementia, I want the little minuses in my head to hold this scene in a vault so I can replay it. JK, I'm not even going to make it that far. Anyways, the cult is understandably blown away by this spectacle. They are convinced this is indeed the devil himself, so Jimmy plays his part. He basically uses it as a control method, having Kelson in his demon form preach about Jimmy's power and how they are to obey his commands still. Things change when the doctor notices one of them is Spike, which causes him to try and utilize his power for good. He tells the cult Jimmy must be sacrificed, but this sends Jimmy off the deep end. This in turn causes him to stab Kelson to prove it was all a ruse, but this sets things off. Spike defends the doctor and one of the cultists jumps in to help out, that being Kelly. This leads to the last members getting taken out and Jimmy disarmed. Sadly though, Kelson's injury is enough to kill him. This results in Spike and Kelly crucifying Jimmy upside down, which completes the story of this twisted Jesus. As Jimmy lives his presumably final moments, he sees Samson return. His vision is clouded, and he views him as an actual demon. Samson, in a pained state, picks up Kelson's body and departs, leaving Jimmy to his fate as a zombie springs out at him. The cult meeting its end was a bit surprising, as I actually was expecting Jimmy to be the final boss of this trilogy. Granted, we haven't seen an official body of Jimmy, so he could be back for the next one. I wouldn't necessarily be upset, but I do feel this is a good ending for Jimmy and his cult, so there's no need to bring him back for more, especially since it basically completed the story of Jesus. That said, Jesus was resurrected, so... I also feel like the death of Kelson, while sad, was indeed an understandable end for him. Kelson may be dead, but if Samson is going to be a prominent figure in the future, then Kelson's legacy lives on. By raising Samson up and sparing his life, Kelson has given hope for the future with his kindness. His actions ended the cult once and for all. And with Spike and Kelly alive, there are more good people in the world that are safe. And now they can hopefully go off and help other survivors in need. The last thing we will talk about, unsurprisingly, is the ending. Of course, not only does it end our fantastic outing of this franchise, but it also is absolutely perfect for fans. To summarize it, we are met with a girl doing what looks like homework before the real star of the scene walks in. Oppenheimer himself, or rather Jim as he's known in this series. Jim basically explains to the girl, presumably his daughter, the Weimar Republic and how she should be wise to know it for her exam tomorrow. Her exam, of course, being a test made by him as she's homeschooled. I guess zombies don't make for the best teachers. It could be worse, he could send her to High School of the Dead.
Damn it, bitch, I said let go!
Anyways, as they have their philosophical discussion, Jim hears some ruckus outside and goes to investigate. They find Spike and Kelly fighting for their lives, to which he decides to help, teaching her that they always have to help people. After that, cut to credits and play Linkin Park. The ending to the movie is simple, but it's so exciting for longtime fans. Firstly, Jim is back. This is quite a significant move to make considering this is the first time we've seen a character from before 28 years in quite a while. Additionally, this also means the comics are decanonized, which in my opinion is not a bad thing. Spoilers if you wish to read them. But in the comics, Jim is essentially killed off while Calypso goes back to being a loner and their adoptive child being given off. To me, this was a very anticlimactic ending to a character we grew to love, and the fates of the other characters felt very regressive of their storylines. Jim was supposed to be a stronger character now that he survived the platoon of Andrew Tates. To have him executed by the military seems like he went back to being weak and pushed around. Calypso going back to being a loner was also a bad move, as her storyline in the movie was her learning to reconnect with people. She spends the first half of the movie very heartless and uncaring. By the end, she learns how to love and how to care for those who aren't herself. So having her give away the girl and just revert back to being a heartless survivor seemed like we just lost everything we had spent the movie fighting for. Granted, we only know the fate of Jim as of right now. We're not entirely sure where Calypso is, considering she doesn't make an appearance, but we're even less sure of where their adoptive daughter is, as she's not seen at all. It's safe to assume the child is the product of Oppenheimer and Calypso, and seeing how young she is, it's safe to assume Calypso at least made it past the events of 28 weeks later, as that happened shortly after the events of Days. As for the scene itself, I find it interesting Jim was explaining the Weimar Republic to his daughter. If you're unaware, the Weimar Republic is what Germany fell into shortly after World War I. With the arms disagreement crippling the country as a whole, Germany was in a desperate situation. Multiple political factions formed, many of them harboring very extremist views and radical members. This led to attacks from far-right and communist members that further destabilized the government. The final nail in the coffin was an economic depression the world had never seen before. This in turn made the people so desperate and afraid that they voted in a man who claimed he was going to make Germany great again and pinned the blame on a minority group, despite the fact that he was a convicted felon for treasonous actions against his country. His campaign was built on nationalism and extreme pride in this country. Soon after, this man formed a secret police organization that grabbed these minorities out of their homes and brought them into custody with inhumane conditions. He began unprovoked attacks on other countries, which resulted in Germany expanding its land in brutal fashion. Eventually, this resulted in a small event you may have heard of called World War II.
Really?
Jim explaining this is quite interesting. The main antagonist of this movie was indeed a cult. This to me is the movie compounding its warning to the audience. History has shown what extremism can lead to, and this movie gave us a demonstration of what humans are capable of when falling into radical views with the Jimmy cult. Even those that are will not be safe, as they will sometimes let them suffer and perish under the twisted views of their extremist beliefs. All of it is of the belief that they are making a better world. Some believe it to be a better world for all, while others believe it will simply just be a better world for themselves. All in all, it's moments like this that make the 28 franchise stick out. Most zombie movies are content with simple thrills and haunts. The apocalypse is a perfect setting for that after all, but the 28 franchise sees this as an opportunity to pull apart the human psyche. Even since the first film, these movies have been showcasing the darkest parts of the human mind when put into a survival situation. There will be groups that form for the sole purpose of subjecting others to torment. There will be cowardly people. But simultaneously, we shouldn't forget the other side. There will be people who sacrifice themselves for the greater good. There will be people who will find their hidden strength and protect those they love. There will be those who will help complete strangers. At the end of the day, a situation like this will show the true colors of people in society, be it good or bad. So with that said, I am Mr. Minus, passing the microphone off to the man himself, Mr. Plus.
Other than that, I can't think of too much else to say about this film that hasn't been said already. I thought Samson speaking the word moon and carrying away Kelson at the end was perfect. The Iron Maiden scene was hardcore. This movie just managed to stick the landing and managed to exceed my expectations. I'm so glad that this movie even managed to bring back the people who were let down by the previous film, and I really hope we get to see the story continue, because the last thing I expected was to see Jim at the end. However, that'll probably be it for this video. If you guys stuck around to the end, we thank you all so much for watching. Let us know down below what you thought of 28 years later The Bone Temple. But on that note, I need to go get myself whatever Samson and Kelson were having.